Welcome back. Qantas CEO Alan Joyce has been grilled at a Senate inquiry into the cost of living, forced to admit the airline owes customers more flight credits than they've been letting on.
How many flight credits is Qantas Group holding on behalf of Australian customers, and why should Qantas keep their money if it's not claimed by the 31st of December?
Again, can I finish the previous question, Senator? Because on Sydney-Canberra, we also need to address it.
No, point of order, Chair. Yes. I have asked a new question and I need it answered.
If the Qatar decision had have gone ahead, would it have reduced Qantas's market share on its European legs?
Oh, well, we only operate to Rome seasonally, and it would have had marginal impact on that.
Just a yes or a no.
Very contentious yesterday. So for more on this, let's bring in National Senator Bridget McKenzie live from Bendigo. Senator, this comes less than a week after Qantas disclosed record profits, which is not a great look. It was for shareholders, but not so much for everybody else. What did you make of Mr Joyce's overall appearance yesterday? Was he dodging the questions?
Absolutely. I think if he could have expanded his answers out to avoid taking more questions from senators, he would have. And so you will have seen in that footage, we tried to keep him on a very tight leash. The fact that he disclosed yesterday he owes Australians hundreds of millions of dollars and is trying to say if they don't claim it by the 31st of December, he's going to pocket it, I think is incredible. And the federal government, the federal transport minister, needs to do something about that because it's not fair.
You're raising, we've been hearing about the $370 million that's owned in Qantas credits. You've uncovered an extra $100 million on top of that. What can be done to refund that? What can the government do? What can the ACCC do to ensure that money gets back to its rightful owner?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great question. So I wrote to the Treasurer last week to ask him to direct the ACCC to actually look into our aviation industry. We know it's getting worse, not better. It's not just Qantas. Prices are through the roof, cancellations and delays are through the roof, and we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. So there is things the government can do to put pressure on our aviation industry to get those prices down and the reliability better, because the cancellation and delays cost us time and money when we're trying to do business. So there's a lot of work to be done, and there are some simple fixes the government could do very, very quickly if they had the guts.
Indeed. Let's talk about also as well that Alan Joyce also refused to say whether competition from Qatar Airways would bring flight prices down. What was your take on that yesterday, Senator?
Oh, I just found that incredible. This guy actually prides himself as a businessman. Now, you know that if there's more competition, prices have to go down because people are competing for your dollar. Now, I live in rural and regional Victoria, and I know if we only have one airline flying into town, prices go through the roof. As soon as either Virgin or Rex rocks up, prices come straight down. And we know that had we been able to add additional capacity from the Qatar Airways decisions, that would have put downward pressure on flight prices internationally. And also importantly, all the bellies of those planes could have been filled up with the freight task to the Middle East from our exporters. And the tourism industry reckoned a couple of weeks ago they put out some figures saying that those additional flights would have added over $780 million, and that's all in jobs and turnover for our local businesses in the tourism task of those extra flights. So it was all upside. So I don't know why the government said no.
Prices are elevated across the board, of course, and when we look at the credit issue, well, Virgin still owes hundreds of millions of dollars in credits as well to customers. Is this just a Qantas issue?
No, I don't think it is, and that's why I wrote to the Treasurer Chalmers last week asking for the ACCC to look at the aviation sector more broadly, because it's not just Qantas. There are issues with getting in and out of Sydney, and that Sydney-Melbourne-Canberra triangle has been shown to have an excessive number of cancellations and delays, and there is some argument that maybe some of the airlines are hoarding their access spots and blocking out competition, which again is forcing prices up.
All right, Senator Bridget McKenzie, we'll leave it there, but we thank you for your time this morning.
Qantas is under the pump this week with CEO Alan Joyce hauled before a Senate inquiry, questioned over missing flight credits and the roadblock on Qatar Airways bringing more flights down under.
If the Qatar decision had have gone ahead, would it have reduced Qantas's market share on its European legs?
Oh, well, we only operate to Rome seasonally, and it would have had marginal impact on that.
Just a yes or a no. Would it have affected Qantas's market share on the European legs?
Again, you can't answer that, Senator, without knowing the counterfactual.
Would Australians have been better off if Qatar were entitled to an additional number of European
We
routes?
believe that with other airlines adding the capacity that they were, airfares were going to come down anyway.
How many flight credits is Qantas Group holding on behalf of Australian customers? And why should Qantas keep their money if it's not claimed by the 31st of December?
Again, can I finish the previous question, Senator? Because on Sydney-Canberra, we also need to address it.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes.
I have asked a new question and I need it answered.
I'm very clear, Mr Joyce, that you are the senior CEO of this operation. You have made a series of comments regarding the $370 million. Does the $370 million include Jetstar credits and credits for overseas?
We're happy to take our notice and bring it back to you, sir.
I'm not sure there was a clear answer in any of that. Let's bring in Rex Deputy Chairman John Sharp now. John, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Alan Joyce is refusing to say whether competition from Qatar Airways would bring down prices. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if Qatar was to come into Australia, it would put pressure on Qantas's prices because more competition leads to lower prices and better services. So it would be really good if Qatar had come into Australia and allowed to have those extra flights.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty basic economics, isn't it? More competition leads to better outcomes for consumers.
It certainly does. And I mean, both internationally, if we could have more international airline flights coming in and out of Australia, we would have lower prices. Prices for international services are around 50% higher than they were pre-COVID. Domestically, prices are still high, and that's because of the arrangements at Sydney Airport, which restricts competition, which enables Qantas to have the lion's share of the business in Australia by a regulated system that seems to lock out other competitors. As a result, prices for our domestic services are higher and customers aren't getting the best that they could get.
John, you're very experienced, obviously, in this sector. How do you see it in terms of whether there is any risk involved in bringing in an international airline like Qatar?
Well, I think there's no risk at all. Qatar's been a very good airline. Throughout COVID, Qatar performed flights to bring Australians home constantly, more so than Qantas did. And I think an airline like Qatar has demonstrated it is a very good airline. It works not just for itself but for Australia. And I think if we could have more airlines like that flying into the country, Australians would get a better price for their international air travel and would have more choice. And that's what competition does. More choice, lower prices, better services for customers.
All right, well, what about the argument that we should be trying to protect Australian businesses here above the interests of international groups?
Well, I think Australian businesses are actually best served by bringing more international tourists into Australia. I mean, you don't want to just protect one business. You have to look at the opportunity that exists across our whole economy if you bring more international tourists. I mean, international tourists can easily spend $1,000 a day whilst they're travelling around in Australia. And that creates more jobs for Australians right across a whole range of businesses. So it's in the broader interest that I think governments need to act rather than the narrow interest of one particular company.
I mean, Alan Joyce is saying that prices will eventually come down. I think the rest of us are all saying, well, when? Why do you think the government isn't acting here? Why do you think the government is protecting Qantas in such a way?
Well, it's very hard to understand why the government is just favouring Qantas at the expense of everything else. You'd have to really ask yourself the question, what's in the national interest? The national interest is best served by having more competition in our airline industry, both internationally and domestically, because it will lead to lower prices, more choices and better services.
Yeah, absolutely. So much very good insight there, John. Really appreciate you joining us this morning. Oh, thanks, Timmy. All right, well, let's move on now. And Qantas boss Alan Joyce has refused to say whether more competition from Qatar Airways would lower international airfares in Australia.
So let's provide some more clarity on the issue and bring in Nine Finance Editor Chris Kohler. Chris, good morning to you. So break it down for us. How would more competition impact prices?
Yeah, good morning, guys. Well, look, it would really just chisel away at the dominance that Qantas has. And the incredible thing here is that no one's really saying that it wouldn't. I mean, it's well understood that allowing Qatar to expand into Australia would mean a faster drop in international ticket prices. And what we now know is that the reason, or big part of the reason that it was denied the chance to expand, is to protect that dominance and protect the profitability of Qantas, which, as we know now, is very strong. So it's quite surprising. And that's kind of why what's being now called a pretty anti-competitive move, really, which is surprising again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all want to have more competitive prices. The federal government insists, though, that bumper profits for Qantas is good news for Australia. Is that the case?
Well, I guess it kind of depends on who you say it's good news for. I mean, Qantas did indeed make $2.5 billion worth of underlying profit last financial year, a record high, and it does have a few 100,000 active shareholders who are also going to be getting a $500 million share buyback. So they are going to be happy. But most people out there, they're going to be a bit less impressed, I think. I mean, most people like Qantas, but they're going to be a bit unhappy with what's been going on lately. There was a class action announced 2 weeks ago against Qantas. The Melbourne to Sydney cancellation rate, so the busiest route we have in Australia, is sitting at about 8.1%. So that's fairly close to 1 in 10 flights being cancelled at the moment. And the amount of complaints heading to the ACCC about Qantas in 2022 was up 68%. So the idea that we don't need any help from an international carrier, I think, would be pretty questioned, I think, out there by most Australians.
Gee, they've got some problems with their brand at the moment, that's for sure. Welcome back to the show. Well, Alan Joyce has copped a grilling in a Senate inquiry. The Qantas boss quizzed over the millions owed to customers in COVID flight credits and the airline's moves to block competition. So this is Mr Joyce responding to those complaints put to him by Senator Bridget McKenzie.
But can I answer the question, Senator? So let's go back on reliability. So Qantas is in a position where it's had 11 of the last 12 months, the lowest level of cancellations overall of any major carrier. In fact, for the last 2 months now, in July and August, both Qantas and Jetstar have beaten Virgin in on-time performance and in cancellation levels. And can I say, when it compares to the rest of the industry has unique problems. When it compares to the rest of the industry, Qantas in July...
She asked a couple of times. Joining us to discuss today's headlines is Tasmanian Senator Jackie Lambie, who you just saw in studio, and Nationals MP Barnaby Joyce. Good morning to you guys. Nice to see you. Jackie, a lot of questions yesterday. I think he was asked a couple of times. We eventually found out it's somewhere between couple of hundred million in those COVID credits that haven't been paid back. Should they be refunded immediately?
I want to be very careful here, Carl. I don't want to lose my lounge privileges again, mate. Now...
Talk to me, Jackie. Talk to me.
No, I don't think anything's really returned from COVID, to be honest with you. I think the people, whether it's the airlines...
All right, Jackie's soft on that one. What about you, Barnaby?
Get into him, Barnaby.
I think... Well, the point is here, this guy's been paid $125 million over the last 15 years. $125 million over the last 15 years. He's entitled to a $15.2 million bonus, I think they said in May. Yet, if you are a part of the Yes campaign, you get to fly around Australia free. But if you're just a regular old punter with a credit, you can't get your money back. I mean, this smells like a stitch-up to me, and a lot of people think it stinks. And we do need greater competition in the marketplace because with cost of living going through the roof, people at least want the capacity to go onto the internet and save themselves a couple of $100 with a cheaper flight.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to do. I think those credits need to be paid back immediately, and also just the number of cancellations at the moment across the board, and also competition. I don't know how more competition leads to greater prices in anyone's world.
Hey there, Today fans, Sarah and...
What's my name again?
Oh my goodness, Carl.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel, though. Subscribe now for more news, special reports, and amazing Aussie stories.
And Carl misbehaving,
Whoa,
of course.
That never happens.
Always happens.
What's she talking about?
Always happens.